Hello, and welcome to Emerging Viewpoints. I'm Nick Stadtmiller. Today, we're joined by João Villaverde to discuss Brazilian politics, the upcoming presidential election, and what to expect from economic policy amid political turbulence. João is a professor in the graduate program in public administration at the Getúlio Vargas Foundation, FGV, in Sao Paulo. Previously, he was a visiting scholar at the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He is the author of the book Dangerous Hits about the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff and co-author of Ruptures in Thought, the autobiography of Bresser, Pereira, and testimonials to Villaverde and Redo. João, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Nick. It's a very, very good feeling to be here in your channel.
Brazil is due to hold elections in October, and in the presidential race, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva appears comfortably ahead of incumbent Jair Bolsonaro. Lula's lead has been shrinking in recent months, however. Early in the year, polls had Lula ahead by 15 or more points, and now that lead seems to have shrunk to 10 or fewer points. But Bolsonaro is coming in with a very strong disapproval rating, north of 60%, and a lot of the polls for a second round matchup between Lula and Bolsonaro show Lula winning comfortably. So, João, is this election's result a foregone conclusion, or do you think it could still be competitive?
That's a very good question, Nick. Well, let me put this way. It's Lula's race to lose. Everything points to him to win this coming election. However, it is not a done deal. So a straightforward answer to your question is no, this is not a done deal already. Even though Lula has everything in his hand to win this election. We are in the midst of a very polarized political environment. As an American, I think you totally relate to that. You totally get it, how you can smell the polarization down here in Brazil. Even though this is not completely new, it is different from the last two election cycles. Since 2014, we had elections in 14, 18, and now 22. But since 2014, this has been, pretty much the thing in Brazil, polarization. The 2014 election ended up with Dilma being reelected with 51% of the vote, against, of course, 49% of her opponent back then. She ended up being impeached. Then we elected for the very first time in our history an extreme right-wing president, Bolsonaro, in 18. And it was also very, very sharp, very narrow win, 55 against 45%. And here we are again. So very, very polarized. But, and I will stop here, with the new ingredient. And I think that makes all the difference. We have a pumping anti-Bolsonaro political force coming from within, the very base of the pyramid in the Brazilian society. And this is brand new, not only because Bolsonaro wasn't around before 2018, so who could be against someone that it's, new, relatively new, but second, and even more important, because Lula, like him or not, he was very skilled in capturing that very diverse anti-Bolsonaro mood to himself, even though he's not at all the only anti-Bolsonaro candidate, the only opposition to Bolsonaro candidate at all. We have a lot of candidates. He was very skilled in making millions and millions of Brazilians perceive him as the only choice to beat Bolsonaro. And to wrap things up, high inflation, even higher than it is in the US now. very, very high interest rates, and this is only beginning to hit the Brazilian economy. High levels of unemployment, high levels of social, in a dismal situation, social in Brazil, and a lot of mixed feelings of hope. If we get rid of Bolsonaro, things will automatically, uh, get well, and hate. So of course, this hate is also towards Lula. So there's a lot of hate around, polarization again. But to maybe the way to see the coming election is really how we started this conversation, Nick. It's for Lula to lose, and I don't think he will.
So you hinted at the high levels of polarization as a parallel to the United States in the past two presidential elections here. And I think there's another interesting parallel, which is how former President Trump in 2020 sought hard to cast doubt on the validity of the electoral process. And you're starting to see that a bit in Brazil as well, where Bolsonaro is talking about how the country's the electronic vote counting mechanisms might be suspect. For the time being, it seems like trust in the system is quite high, with polls showing more than 60% of Brazilians trusting that system. But do you think this line of attack can resonate with the Brazilian public? And do you think Bolsonaro could successfully undermine confidence in the vote's outcome?
That's another very good question. Well, like everything, Bolsonaro copy and pastes the right wing from the U.S. Everything. So he is copy and pasting outright everything that Trump did, and that includes storming the Capitol Hill. That includes saying that any other result that doesn't mean I won equals to fraud. Everything, the same, the same slogans, the same wording, every little thing, every single detail you can think and remember. How was Trump, and how were the Trump supporters back in 2020? That's the Bolsonaro camp in 2022 in Brazil. Really is copy and paste. I think the only significant difference is that Bolsonaro has been talking about voter fraud before it became fashion. So even before he won in 2018, that was already a motto from him. I'm not saying that he said that before Trump. I'm saying that this is the one thing he's consistent with. He has always been saying that the voting system in Brazil is pro-establishment, and establishment for Bolsonaro is basically everyone that is not him, his family, and his very close allies. So the left, the right, the democratic right, the center, the media, Joe Biden, Macron, everyone, unions, of course, soccer teams, everything. So that's the establishment, according to Bolsonaro, his family, and his allies. And for him, the voting system is totally directed towards his opponent and his opponents. And so if he loses, it's because of fraud. There's no debate about that. So when you reinforce that to millions and millions of people using WhatsApp, which is a very, very popular media outlet for Brazilians, even more than it is in the US, you get I don't want to say brainwash, because that's not it, but you get a lot of people basically considering this as a stable fact, because they have been listening, reading, watching different people talking about that for years and years now, right? So there's a cultural thing. Having said that, you are 100% right when you said confidence levels of across the board Brazilians with the voting system is high. And it is true, it is high, because we have been voting using these machines that we vote since 1996. And different independent foreign and internal organizations, companies, the army, they already try to rig, to try to see if there's a little problem, and no one ever found anything. So it is really just a bluff. In this sense, it's just like Trump. It's a bluff. I think, and I will stop after I say the next sentence, even though it's not a good sentence to say, it's a sad one. But I think he will prevail to a certain extent because this is a soccer country. And for the first time ever, we won't have the World Cup happening in July. We always have in Brazil, elections, national elections in Brazil, in the same year of the World Cup, every single time. We have a World Cup in 2022, but for the first time in the history of World Cups, it's going to happen in November, not in July. This is very important in this voting thing, and I will try to make myself understandable. That means that we won't have kind of the vacation soccer World Cup period that we always did in July. And only after that, by August onward, it's when everyone starts to pay attention in the elections. We won't have that break this year. So we are already talking about the elections. Not only us, our group of people, every single people in Brazil is already breathing into the elections. And without the break that the World Cup always provides, with the Bolsonaro machinery doubling down on this, everything is a fraud. If I don't win, is a fraud. I do think that and we're talking now about 25, 30 million people actually believing that's true. So even if he loses, and I think he will, as I said, and even if he loses outright in the first round, which is not common at all in Brazil, but that might happen. Still, if you have 25 million people not accepting at all the result, it's and having access to guns and so on and so forth. I mean, that's a kind of a troubling scenario, and one that we don't have a clear, data, clear recollection of, past examples. This is going to be the very first, so we don't know how to react and to completely comprehend what's ahead.
So your base case remains that Lula wins this election in October, and maybe it would make sense to think about what policy might look like under a Lula administration. Now, of course, Lula has been rather tight-lipped about his plans for economic policy and is focusing more on an anti-Bolsonaro message. But a lot of analysts have looked back at the previous Lula administration from 2003 to 2010 and said, hey, the fiscal account was kept in check, the deficit wasn't out of control, the debt burden as a percentage of GDP fell, incomes rose. It was really sort of the only period in the last 3 decades that you had strong growth in per capita real incomes. So what do you think we could expect from fiscal and economic policy in a Lula administration?
That's the $1 billion question. That's also why it's a very good one. So since it really feels that Lula is going to be the next president once again, we are, I don't want to say it's a wishful thinking, but we want to believe that he's going to do, as you said it correctly, the way he did last time. Lula's administration was pretty much, if not 100%, but 99% of a continuation of the economic policy of his predecessor, who was centrist to center-right Cardoso administration. He even kept, the central bank board of Cardoso administration. So there's two things there. He not only invited those folks to stay, but those folks said, yes, we can stay. He maintained personnel, overall direction, and he even increased the fiscal target. So that was a very conservative economic agenda, especially in the first of the two terms of Lula. Will that happen once again? I want to say that in some chunks, yes, and in some other chunks, very key chunks, no. Let's start with a yes, with the good news. So Lula is a very pragmatic human being, very, very pragmatic, and he, like we say in Portuguese, he is not the one who likes to keep punching a knife, meaning he immediately sees something that is not going to work, so why bother trying, right? That means he's not going to have in his Ministry of Economics someone from, the leftist ranks of the PT, someone from, the typical PT, his party economist. He is not. And we can return to this in a year from now, and we're going to see that that's going to be true. Even though no one, maybe not even Lula, knows if he's going to be someone from the financial sector, who he used the last time around. It might be some guy from the academia, or a woman, of course, some person from the academia that has a very orthodox way to perceive reality. So that's pretty much what Lula's going to do. He's a very pragmatic guy. He understands that some of the economic agenda of Temer and even Bolsonaro need to stay. Having said that, the parts that he's going to change, well, he's basically going to, strip whatever is remaining of the spending cap, of the constitutional spending cap. It's already kind of a broken toy by Bolsonaro, but it's still a scarecrow, a very weak one, but it's still there. And I don't think Lula is going to stick around with the spending cap. So we might be in 1 year time talking about maybe we need another fiscal anchor. What will be the new fiscal anchor of Brazil? And his team's probably gonna come with a new idea, but it's not gonna be on the spending side. Maybe it's gonna be on the the public debt side. I don't know, but my feeling is that he's gonna have a very pragmatic approach to the economic agenda. So he's gonna maintain the independence, the formal independence of the central bank, including the current governor of Bacen, chosen by Bolsonaro. He's going to continue with Lula, and have a very, orthodox, or at least a mildly orthodox personality running the show with the Ministry of Economics, but also, getting rid of what's left of the fiscal anchor.
So one reason that many observers are optimistic about economic orthodoxy and fiscal discipline under a Lula administration is because of his choice of running mate Geraldo Alckmin, a center-right figure. But I think someone could make the counter-argument that the same thing essentially happened under the Bolsonaro administration, where Bolsonaro chose Paulo Guedes, the Chicago-trained economist, as orthodox as they come, as his economy minister. So does that mean that we couldn't really trust the value of people under the president in terms of actually enforcing economic orthodoxy? I mean, would Alckmin have enough standing to push back some more leftist elements of the Lula administration if they wanted to move to a looser fiscal stance?
That's a very, very good point. There's a lot of similarities, but at least two very important differences between the two cases. Let me quickly run through the similarities. Yes, Alckmin is a caution to the typical PT agenda. Alckmin is a fiscal conservative guy. He's a poster boy for fiscal responsibility. He was for ages the governor of São Paulo state, the largest and more powerful state in the country, for ages. He ran as a presidential candidate the last time around, 2018, and he had the best team available of economists working with him. Pércio Arida, Edmar Pasha, Arminio Fraga, just the greatest. So that's Alckmin. Whereas for Paulo Guedes and Bolsonaro, there's a similarity there as well. So Bolsonaro used Guedes as a poster boy for, I'm not going to be doing everything that I already did as a deputy, because Bolsonaro has had a terrible track record. But, having Paulo Guedes as a cushion to say, look, he's not going to, allow me to be me. And people wanted to believe that. 4 years onto it, we all know that's not the case. But now the differences, and there's two, I think, and they're very important to us to keep an eye on it. The first one is that Alckmin is going to be vice president of Brazil if Lula and himself, if they win, if that's the winning ticket. One thing is for you to be a minister like Guedes, very powerful, all the public banks belong to him, everything, very, very powerful, but he can be fired. And we saw in the last 4 years, his opinion was just his opinion. Bolsonaro basically destroyed the spending cap of Brazil and many other things without Guedes, agreeing or not, wasn't important. Whereas if you are a vice president, okay, you're not the president, I understand that, but we are an impeachment country. We do impeach our presidents. So Alckmin will have a much stronger card to pressure if he needs to pressure, which is votes in the Congress. Our Congress is a conservative Congress and will stick as a conservative Congress. So he's going to have, the carrot and the stick. And the stick is basically, if I need to pressure that much, I can impeach you. I'm not saying he will do that. I'm just, that's a very important difference. And then he becomes the president of Brazil if something happens to Lula. And that something might be impeachment, it might be any other thing. So that's a very strong difference. The second one is that Alckmin has a record. Guedes didn't. The very first time Guedes had a public office was in January 1st, 2019, when he became the Minister of Economics. Before that, he wrote columns to newspapers and magazines. He gave interviews saying what was going to, to be right, was going to be wrong. He was a voice in the Brazilian society, but that was pretty much it. While Alckmin was the governor of São Paulo state for ages, from 2001 until 2010. To 2001 until 2006, and then from 2010 until 2018. He ran for mayor, he ran for president twice, and in 2006, he ran against Lula when Lula was re-elected president, and Alckmin had 50 million votes to become the president of Brazil. So that's a tested record. And I think that's a very strong difference. So when Alckmin says, I am pro-fiscal responsibility, or I believe in this, or I believe in that, whatever, is this or that, he has a track record to one to check if he complies or not. Whereas for Guedes was just writing words in a Word document and then sending it around to be published in a newspaper.
I'd like to turn to Brazil's rather complicated relationship with Russia. And if you recall, in February, not long before Russia decided to invade Ukraine, Jair Bolsonaro decided to pay Mr. Putin a visit, which, of course, raised a lot of eyebrows in the US and other Western capitals. Now, since the invasion, Brazil has formally criticized Russia for the invasion of Ukraine, has voted against Russia in various international fora. But at the same time, right after the invasion in early March, Brazil sent a large quantity of sugar to Russia because there was quite a shortage there. And Brazil has also repeatedly sought continued access to fertilizer imports from Russia because Russia, of course, is a very important source of fertilizer. So you have this very difficult tightrope between maintaining good relations with the US and Europe by being harder on Russia, but also not wanting to close the door to Russian trade altogether. And my question to you is, can Brazil continue to walk this tightrope? Can they have a workable relationship with the Kremlin whilst preserving a decent relationship with the US and other Western countries?
That's another very good point. For everyone that is watching this channel, you probably already know, but I have to highlight, Nick is one of the top voices when it comes to Ukraine, to Russia, and I'm also desperate to hear from your side, Nick. But let me go straight forward to your point. I do think that Brazil can keep this very kind of, we want to say Russia is, is not right in doing what they're doing, but at the same time, please, let's still be friends, if I can say it like that. Why? Because that's one of the few things that Lula and Bolsonaro agree, for different reasons. So Bolsonaro basically went to Putin. He couldn't understand less Russia. Of course, he doesn't know who Dostoevsky ever was, or Tolstoy, or classical composers, or he couldn't care less. He doesn't understand Putin. He doesn't understand Ukraine, or anything. And he couldn't care about the war as well. He was there because of the Russian artillery regarding social media and control of information, and how to use those schemes for Bolsonaro's electoral ticket. While Lula was very vocal just 1 week ago, 1 week before we were recording this conversation, Nick, he was the front cover of Time magazine, and when asked about Russia and Ukraine, he said, of course, Russia is not doing a good thing, but both sides are responsible for the war. So he's, equaling Zelensky, who is clearly a victim, to Putin. So they basically agree for different reasons. There's one thing that is very weird about the Brazilian left, is that the left in Brazil, they are pro-Putin, pro-Russia, because, and I don't know how to say that differently than, because they stopped reading books in 1988. So Russia still is equal to Soviet Union. And I'm not being, simplistic. I've been to a lot, and I mean a lot, of leftist organizations, assemblies in the past few weeks. And whenever people talked about, they got the microphone to talk about Russia, and they went to those, communist slogans, and it's pretty much as if nothing happened since 1991. Nothing. So Russia is still perceived as the counter-hegemonic power against capitalism, against the US, against Europe. So they must be defended, even though they commit mistakes. Yes, they commit mistakes. They shouldn't, kill that number of people. Some people, that's okay. So, of course, I'm making a little bit of jokes here and there, but to say that for different reasons, Bolsonaro and Lula, they don't want to aggravate they don't want to escalate, that's the right word, the situation against Russia. Finally, there's a lot of pressure and lobbies from the commodities part of the Brazilian economy, and we are a commodity country, right? Saying Mr. President, and the Mr. President now is Bolsonaro, they will say Mr. President to Lula the same way, Mr. President, please, we still need the fertilizers from Russia. So don't do something that might make them think twice. So from diplomatic side, right or left, and from the commercial standpoint, you have, for a myriad of reasons, a combination that leads to Brazil being neutral when it comes to a war regarding Russia. And I do think you're not going to see pressure from any side of the Brazilian society to change that stance, neither from Bolsonaro or from Lula in a year from now.
João, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Nick. I always learn a lot from exchanging with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.